Turning now to your politics on this Thursday morning, so much going on, especially with the congressional committees and the Supreme Court. And Congressman Adam Schiff just announcing he's running for Dianne Feinstein's Senate seat. Here to break it all down for us, as she always does on Thursday, is Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning, Giselle. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday to you. So much going on. Let's start with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy removing California Congressman Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell from the House Intelligence Committee. They say it's an act of vengeance. What's the significance?
It's definitely payback. And this is an unusual move. This is typically a bipartisan committee, but this is payback possibly for Nancy Pelosi not seating some members of the Republican Party on the January 6th committee. It could be payback for Adam Schiff impeaching Donald Trump for during the first impeachment. Remember, he's the only president who's had 2 impeachments. It's hard to say what it's payback for. It could also be that Kevin McCarthy cut this as part of the deal for getting the speakership, but it's an unusual move.
Yeah, unprecedented, in fact. So Adam Schiff is announcing he's running for Dianne Feinstein's seat. She has yet to actually say she's not going to run for re-election. She's been in that seat 30 years, as you know. Katie Porter also running. Very competitive.
It's going to probably be the most expensive race in California history. And the fact that you have Schiff and Porter running and others who are likely to jump into the race, we just have a lot of great choices. That's what I'll say. These are folks who have been in Congress for quite some time, obviously Schiff longer than Porter, but both of them highly qualified and would do a great job. So it's just a matter of what California voters want.
So Kevin McCarthy also attempting to oust Representative Ilhan Omar from her committee for anti-Semitic comments she's apologized for against Israel. Unlike Adam Schiff and Swalwell, this is not a select committee, so the Congress gets to vote on it. Does McCarthy have the votes? There are some Republicans pushing back.
I don't think so. 2 Republicans have already defected. The vote's going to take place next week, and Democrats are lobbying to find 2 more Republicans to vote against removing her from her committee positions. This is a pretty unprecedented move, too. It's obviously some political retribution, possibly some racism involved here. It's just a very unusual move, especially for comments that were made years ago for which she apologized.
Kevin McCarthy says he's removing Schiff and Eric Swalwell because they lied. But he seems to have no problem allowing admitted liar George Santos to keep his seats. What's the disconnect? And does it hurt the party? Forget all the stuff around it. Does it hurt the party?
Yeah, if you're a Republican, you don't want George Santos in your party. But he voted to make sure that Kevin McCarthy got the speakership, and so McCarthy's going to stand by him. It's not illegal to lie about your employment or your ethnicity or your work history or your wealth, but Santos is now facing possible criminal investigations into campaign contributions coming from Redstone, which is not even a registered political PAC. He also loaned himself $700,000. So he's running afoul possibly of federal election committee laws.
And that could take him down if there's criminal charges. All right, there's a very competitive race to become the next chair of the RNC. And My Pillow CEO Mike Lindell now with a real shot at winning. What do you make of that?
Well, he's a conspiracy theorist, and this is part of a wave of folks whom I would argue Donald Trump has really empowered, the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world. Lindell, if you haven't followed him, he's a hoot to follow on social media, mostly because a lot of his claims are very conspiracy driven. And it would be laughable, except that if he's in a position of power, that means that the Republican Party will move even further to the extreme.
Right. So the nation is bracing for potential indictments, as you well know, from the Georgia grand jury over former President Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. We've talked about this for years now. How unprecedented if these indictments come down, and what should we expect?
It's hard to know what to expect, but I would expect something because the Fulton County DA Willis slipped and said that she didn't, when making the argument in front of a judge as to why the grand jury investigation shouldn't be public, she referred to defendants. So that indicates that there will be charges. The question is what? She's obviously looking into the phone call with Brad Raffensperger and violations of state election laws. She's also suggested that she's looking at racketeering laws. And this is a grand jury that met for 8 months, 23 people, interviewed 75 witnesses, looked at countless documents. I would expect something. The question really is who in Trump's camp might be indicted, including Trump himself, and what the charges will be.
Yeah, and those are expected imminently. We'll be keeping an eye on that. So all eyes on the Supreme Court, Caroline, especially on gun control reform after 3 mass shootings here in California in 3 days. California, as you know, has some of the strictest gun laws in the nation. But are the laws we have now in jeopardy because of the conservative court?
They are. In fact, if you look at gun control, this is perhaps the bleakest history since major gun control efforts have been put in place the last 50 years or so. This court cited against the state of New York. They overturned a concealed weapons ban in the state of New York, which opened it up so that any state laws restricting any type of putting any limits on guns are now in play. So we should expect the high capacity, the assault weapons ban in California. We should expect our state gun laws to be challenged, and the Supreme Court will likely overturn them in coming years.
Right. And I have to ask you about this because it is your specialty. A surprise Sundance Film Festival documentary revealed sexual assault allegations against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Will we see investigations, and what does it mean for him on the high court?
Well, this is yet another Supreme Court justice who has serious allegations of sexual violence. We knew that going into it during his hearing with Dr. Blasey Ford. What the new Sundance documentary reveals is confirmation from additional witnesses in Blasey Ford's case, as well as at least one other very serious allegation during his time at Yale. Nothing will happen. This is outside of the statute of limitations for prosecuting rape. But, you know, it does call into question who we put on the highest court. And what we are comfortable with. And I would argue, you know, a rape culture where we simply don't really treat this crime as a crime.
Right. And they, as you know, Americans have the lowest opinion of the high court they have in its history. And before I let you go, we're still waiting on the Supreme Court to rule on the independent legislature theory. This is a ruling that could decide the very fate of democracy. Just briefly, because we don't have a lot of time, but what's at stake? States can overturn national elections?
That's correct, Giselle. It's the Moore v. Harper case, and it would allow state legislatures to override the courts in their state, override voters, and submit their own election slates. So essentially what we saw in the last election with the 7 fake elector slates, that would be perfectly legal. That's what's at stake.
Wow, there's so much going on, so much to take in and get your arms around. We thank you so much for lending your expertise as you do every week. What would we do without you? Caroline Heldman, Professor of Critical Theory and Social Justice at Occidental College. Thanks again for being with us. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Giselle.